Welcome to NIMROD TV, your global source for insightful analysis on international affairs. Today we delve into a topic of immense importance: U.S. aid to Africa. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Our focus: U.S. aid to Africa, a multifaceted issue with a long history and far-reaching consequences. From healthcare initiatives to infrastructure projects, the U.S. has been a major player in Africa's development journey. But the question remains, who truly benefits? U.S. assistance to Africa dates back decades, evolving with geopolitical shifts and driven by a mix of humanitarian and strategic interests. The narrative is far from simple. Success stories coexist with stark failures, and debates rage on about dependency, corruption, and the effectiveness of aid. Critics argue that despite billions of dollars in aid, many African nations remain trapped in cycles of poverty and conflict. They point to instances of mismanagement, lack of transparency, and the potential for aid to fuel corruption, hindering true development. So, who really benefits from U.S. aid to Africa? Let's delve deeper. To understand U.S. aid to Africa, we must journey back to the early 20th century. Much of Africa was under European colonial rule, and American involvement was limited. Missionary activities focused on education and healthcare. Post-World War II, the U.S. emerged as a superpower. Newly independent African nations presented opportunities and challenges. Truman's 1949 address pledged support for developing countries. This marked a shift in U.S. foreign policy. The Cold War intensified U.S. engagement in Africa. The Cold War cast a long shadow over U.S. aid to Africa, shaping its direction and priorities. As the U.S. and Soviet Union vied for influence, aid became a tool of geopolitical strategy. Support often flowed to regimes aligned with the West, regardless of their human rights records or commitment to democratic principles. This period witnessed the establishment of key institutions like the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, in 1961. USAID became the primary vehicle for channeling U.S. aid, focusing on development projects in areas like agriculture, infrastructure, and health. While driven by Cold War imperatives, this era also saw some genuine achievements in poverty reduction and social development. However, the strategic interests often overshadowed the humanitarian goals, creating a legacy of dependency and skewed priorities. Throughout the latter half of the 20th century, USAID remained a central player in U.S. aid to Africa. Its programs expanded to encompass a wider range of sectors, from education and healthcare to democracy promotion and environmental protection. The agency played a significant role in combating diseases, improving agricultural practices, and providing humanitarian assistance during crises. One of USAID's most notable contributions has been in the fight against HIV/AIDS. The President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, launched in 2003, has provided billions of dollars for treatment, prevention, and care programs across Africa, saving millions of lives. Despite these successes, USAID has also faced criticism for its bureaucratic inefficiencies, top-down approach, and lack of local ownership. Critics argue that projects are often designed with limited input from African beneficiaries, leading to programs that are unsustainable or misaligned with local needs. The early decades of U.S. aid to Africa witnessed both successes and missed opportunities. While some programs contributed to improvements in health, education, and infrastructure, the overarching goal of fostering self-sustaining economic growth remained elusive. The end of the Cold War prompted a re-evaluation of U.S. foreign assistance policies. With the Soviet threat diminished, the focus shifted towards promoting democracy, good governance, and free markets. Aid became increasingly tied to conditions, requiring recipient countries to implement political and economic reforms. This shift towards conditionality, while well-intentioned, had mixed results. The debate over the role of conditionality in aid effectiveness continues to this day. The core principle of U.S. aid to Africa is empowering its people. This means investing in health, education, and social safety nets. U.S. aid expands access to education, especially for girls. Building schools and training teachers breaks the cycle of poverty. Vocational training equips individuals for employment. Programs focus on agriculture, technology, and entrepreneurship. U.S. aid strengthens social safety nets for the vulnerable. Efforts include food assistance and support for orphans. Recognizing that robust infrastructure is a cornerstone of economic development, U.S. aid has significantly contributed to building and improving vital infrastructure across the African continent. This encompasses transportation networks, energy systems, water and sanitation facilities, and digital connectivity. Investing in transportation infrastructure such as roads, bridges, and railways facilitates trade, reduces transportation costs, and connects remote communities to markets and essential services. This enhanced connectivity empowers businesses to expand their reach, farmers to transport their goods more efficiently, and individuals to access education and healthcare facilities with greater ease. Access to reliable and affordable energy is another critical factor in promoting economic growth and improving living standards. U.S. aid supports the development of renewable energy sources such as solar and wind power, reducing reliance on fossil fuels, and promoting sustainability. Moreover, investments in water and sanitation infrastructure are crucial for public health, reducing the incidence of waterborne diseases and improving overall hygiene. Investing in health is a strategic imperative for unlocking human potential and driving economic growth. U.S. aid combats infectious diseases, improves maternal and child health, and strengthens healthcare systems in Africa. The President's Emergency Plan for AIDS. Relief has saved millions of lives since 2003. It provides billions for HIV/AIDS prevention, treatment, and care. U.S. aid also targets malaria, tuberculosis, and neglected tropical diseases. Efforts include distributing bed nets, providing medications, and strengthening disease surveillance. U.S. aid improves prenatal care, ensures safe childbirth, and provides vaccinations. These interventions save lives and contribute to a healthier, productive population. Education empowers individuals to shape their destinies and contribute to society. U.S. aid invests in education, from primary to vocational training. Initiatives include building schools, training teachers, and providing scholarships. Vocational programs offer skills in agriculture, technology, and entrepreneurship. These programs lead to employment and economic growth. U.S. aid also fosters partnerships between American and African universities. These partnerships nurture future leaders and innovators. While U.S. aid to Africa is often framed as a benevolent gesture aimed at uplifting nations, a persistent critique centers on the potential for aid to foster dependency, hindering rather than helping countries achieve self-sufficiency. Critics argue that long-term reliance on external assistance can erode local initiative, distort markets, and create a cycle of aid dependence. The concern is that when aid flows consistently, governments may become less accountable to their own citizens and more beholden to foreign donors. This can undermine democratic processes and create a disincentive for governments to implement sound economic policies that foster sustainable growth and development. The challenge lies in striking a delicate balance, providing aid in a way that empowers rather than creates dependency. One of the most persistent and damaging criticisms leveled against U.S. aid to Africa is the issue of corruption and mismanagement. Despite good intentions, aid funds are sometimes siphoned off by corrupt officials, failing to reach their intended beneficiaries or being used to finance projects that serve personal interests rather than the public good. This not only undermines the effectiveness of aid programs but also erodes public trust, both in recipient countries and among taxpayers in donor nations. When aid is perceived as fueling corruption rather than alleviating suffering, it breeds cynicism and undermines the very goals it aims to achieve. Donor countries must strengthen oversight mechanisms, ensuring transparency and accountability in how aid funds are used. Recipient governments must demonstrate a commitment to good governance, tackling corruption at its roots and creating a culture of transparency and accountability. While there are undoubtedly success stories in the annals of U.S. aid to Africa, there are also instances where aid has fallen short of its promise, failing to deliver the intended impact or even exacerbating existing problems. One common pitfall is the so-called white elephant syndrome. where aid money is used to build impressive infrastructure projects that are poorly planned, unsustainable, or disconnected from local needs. These projects may become symbols of wasted resources, failing to benefit the communities they were intended to serve. Another challenge is the potential for aid to create unintended consequences, distorting local markets, fostering dependency, or fueling conflict. These examples underscore the importance of rigorous impact evaluations, learning from both successes and failures to ensure that aid is targeted effectively, responsive to local needs, and designed to promote sustainable solutions rather than creating new problems. Beyond the issues of dependency, corruption, and unintended consequences, a more fundamental critique of U.S. aid to Africa questions the very power dynamics at play. Critics argue that aid, despite its humanitarian veneer, is often used as a tool of neo-colonialism, perpetuating Western dominance and undermining African agency. They point to the fact that aid is often tied to conditions that promote Western economic interests, such as trade liberalization, or the privatization of public services, even when these policies may not be in the best interests of recipient countries. The challenge is to move beyond a donor-recipient paradigm towards a more equitable partnership based on mutual respect, shared decision-making, and a recognition of African agency and leadership in determining their own development path. While the narrative surrounding U.S. aid to Africa is often dominated by Western voices, it is crucial to amplify the perspectives of those most directly affected, the people of Africa themselves. Increasingly, African leaders, intellectuals, and civil society organizations are challenging the traditional aid paradigm, demanding greater ownership, accountability, and a shift in power dynamics. They argue that the narrative often focuses on deficits and dependence, overlooking the agency, resilience, and achievements of African people. They emphasize the need to move beyond a paternalistic approach that views Africans as passive recipients of aid towards a more equitable partnership that recognizes their knowledge, expertise, and capacity to lead their own development. These voices call for greater investment in strengthening institutions, promoting good governance, fostering innovation, and unlocking the immense potential of the continent's human and natural resources. A recurring theme in the discourse surrounding U.S. aid to Africa is the need for a fundamental shift from a donor-driven model to one that prioritizes African ownership and leadership. This means moving beyond a top-down approach, where Western donors dictate the terms of engagement, towards a more collaborative and participatory model. African governments and civil society organizations are increasingly demanding a seat at the table, not just as beneficiaries, but as equal partners in shaping aid programs, setting priorities, and monitoring outcomes. They argue that aid is more effective and sustainable when it aligns with national development plans, reflects local context, and empowers local actors. This shift towards ownership also entails greater transparency and accountability in aid flows. African governments are being urged to strengthen their own institutions, combat corruption, and ensure that aid funds are used effectively and reach those most in need. Section 3, towards self-reliance, fostering sustainable development from within. True progress must come from within. African leaders emphasize building strong institutions, good governance, and investing in education and healthcare. Africa has vast untapped potential in its resources and entrepreneurial spirit. Unlocking this requires investments in education, training, and infrastructure. Many countries are implementing plans to reduce poverty and achieve economic diversification. These plans prioritize agriculture, infrastructure, manufacturing, and tourism for a sustainable future. Section 4, a new era of cooperation, shared responsibility, mutual respect. Envision a new era of cooperation, grounded in shared responsibility and mutual respect. Move beyond outdated paradigms and embrace a more equitable approach. The U.S. can support Africa's development aspirations. Respect African agency and empower people to shape their destinies. Listen to African voices and work together for sustainable solutions. True progress is measured by well-being, dignity, and empowerment. Section 1. The enduring question, finding the right balance. As we conclude our exploration of U.S. aid to Africa, the question remains, who truly benefits? The answer is complex. U.S. aid combats diseases, improves healthcare, expands education, and supports infrastructure development. Millions of lives have been saved, and many lifted from poverty. However, there are shortcomings, unintended consequences, and criticisms. The challenge is finding the right balance, empowering without creating dependency, strengthening local institutions, and promoting sustainable solutions. Section 2. A call to action towards a more just and equitable future. U.S. aid to Africa is a matter of profound moral and ethical significance. It's about our shared humanity and responsibility to create a just world, ensuring every individual has the opportunity to live a dignified life. Engage in informed dialogue and challenge our assumptions. Listen to African voices and support their efforts. Shape more effective and just aid policies. Stay informed, engage with officials, and support sustainable development. Let us ensure U.S. aid empowers individuals and strengthens communities.